She walked into the community hall quietly, almost unnoticed by the people who were already gathered there. The place was filled with small groups talking to each other, laughing, and waiting for the music event to begin. She didn't know many of them, and they didn't know her either. She simply chose a seat near the back, close to the wall, where she could watch everything without being seen too much. The piano stood at the front of the hall, a little old but still beautiful. Its wooden surface had scratches, and the keys had lost their shine, but it still carried a certain charm. People kept glancing at it, wondering who would be the first to play. It was the kind of event where anyone could go up and try a few notes, just for fun. No one expected anything serious. It was meant to be light, casual, a friendly gathering. She sat with her hands on her lap, listening to the conversations around her. Some people talked about how they used to learn music when they were younger. Others said they had forgotten everything they once knew. A few joked that they hoped no one would play too loudly. Everyone seemed relaxed, but when their eyes reached her, they didn't think much of her. She was quiet, maybe a little too quiet for their usual gatherings. Someone whispered that she looked shy, like she wouldn't dare to touch the piano. Another person nodded, saying she probably came just to watch. She didn't react. She didn't turn around or correct them. She just kept looking at the piano, not with fear, but with a kind of longing. It had been so long since she last touched one. She could almost feel the coolness of the keys under her fingertips, the familiar weight of them when she pressed down. She wondered if she still remembered the pieces she used to play. A part of her felt uncertain, but another part felt alive, awake. The music inside her had never truly left. After a little while, one of the event organizers stood up and clapped his hands to get attention. He had a cheerful personality, and people liked him. He joked easily and liked keeping the crowd entertained. "All right," he said loudly. "Who wants to go first? Don't be shy. This is not a competition. Anyone can try." A few people laughed, but stayed in their seats. No one wanted to be the first dot. The organizer's eyes moved around the hall, looking for someone to tease into volunteering. When he spotted her, sitting quietly at the back, he smiled in a playful way. "How about you?" he said. "You're sitting so silent there. Come on, give it a try. Let's hear a note or two." The tone of his voice wasn't rude, but it wasn't serious either. People around him chuckled. They expected her to wave her hand and say no, maybe blush or shake her head. They didn't think she had any real skill. To them, she looked like someone who might press one key and stop. She didn't blame them. They didn't know her. They didn't know anything about her past. They didn't know that she once spent countless evenings practicing alone in her room. They didn't know how music had once been the only thing that brought her comfort on difficult days. They didn't know that there was a time she played until her fingers hurt just because it made her heart feel calm, but she didn't say any of that. She simply stood up. The hall became a little quieter. The organizer seemed surprised, but he laughed lightly, as if trying to keep the moment fun. "There you go," he said. "Let's see what you can do." She walked toward the stage, her steps steady but gentle. Her eyes stayed on the piano the whole time, as if the rest of the room didn't exist. People watched her with mild curiosity. A few were waiting to see something awkward or funny. Some were whispering, wondering if she was actually going to play something. She reached the bench, touched the back of it softly, and sat down. The bench creaked under her weight. The piano was so close now that she could feel the faint scent of old wood. She lifted her hands slowly and placed them on the keys. The hall fell silent. Not completely, but enough that she could feel every pair of eyes on her. She pressed one key gently. The note rang out, a little dull but still warm. She pressed another. Then she tested a few more notes, moving her fingers lightly across the keyboard. She wasn't playing yet. She was just letting herself reconnect with the instrument she had missed for so long. For a moment, she wasn't in the hall anymore. She was back in her old room, sitting in front of her second-hand piano, practicing with all her heart. She remembered the frustration of trying to learn difficult pieces. She remembered the joy when she finally got them right. She remembered the quiet pride she used to feel when she played for herself alone. Back then, she had dreams of performing in front of people, not for fame or applause, but simply to share something meaningful. But those dreams faded when she went through a difficult time. During her school years, some classmates made fun of her slow progress. They said she would never be good. They said she should give up. And eventually, she did. She stopped playing for others. The fear of being mocked again stayed with her. So she kept the music to herself. She played only when no one was around. But now, here she was, sitting in front of a piano again, in front of strangers who expected almost nothing from her dot. Her breathing steadied. Her fingers relaxed. She knew she could walk away. She knew she didn't owe anyone a performance. But deep inside, she also felt something else, a small spark that she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to play. Not to prove anything. Not to impress anyone. She just wanted to feel the music again. The crowd waited. Some were polite. Some were curious. Some were amused. They had no idea what was about to happen. She took one slow breath and let her fingers rest gently across the keys. She didn't choose the piece. The piece chose her. It was something she had played many times before, something full of feeling and movement, something that came from the heart. For a moment she stayed still, letting her mind settle. Then she pressed the first real note dot. It was soft, but steady dot. Someone in the crowd leaned forward. She pressed another note, and then another, shaping the beginning of a melody she knew so well. Her fingers moved with a natural flow, almost like they had been waiting for this moment. The sound filled the hall softly at first, carried by her gentle touch. People stopped whispering. They stopped shifting in their seats. They stopped expecting something ordinary. They watched. The organizer who had invited her to play tilted his head, trying to understand what he was hearing. This wasn't someone tapping keys randomly. This wasn't someone pretending to know music. Her hands moved with purpose, with memory, with confidence. The hall grew completely still as the melody began to unfold. She didn't lift her head. She didn't need to. Her world was the piano. The rest of the room faded. In that moment, she wasn't the quiet person sitting at the back. She wasn't the shy girl people assumed she was. She was someone who had carried music inside her for years, waiting for the right moment to let it out again. The first part of the piece grew slightly stronger, and her fingers moved faster. The old piano responded with a warm, rich tone. It was as if the instrument itself had been waiting for someone like her. The audience exchanged glances, their expressions changing from boredom to surprise. No one had expected this. She kept playing, lost in her own world, unaware that the room had shifted. People who doubted her were now silent. Those who underestimated her were now watching closely. Every note challenged their assumptions. Every movement of her hands told a story. She wasn't performing for them. She was simply letting herself be free. And as the melody continued, something inside her began to open again, the part of her that once believed she could play, that once believed her music mattered. For the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again, and the audience, without realizing it, was witnessing the beginning of something they would never forget. When she pressed the last note of the short melody she had begun with, she didn't lift her hands right away. She kept them resting on the keys, feeling the soft vibration fade under her fingertips. She wasn't done. She was simply giving herself one small moment to breathe. The hall remained silent behind her, and although she hadn't turned around once, she could sense the shift in the air. People were no longer waiting for her to make a mistake or end quickly. They were now paying attention, real attention. But the moment that followed the pause, the stillness pulled her back into her own memory. She remembered the first time she ever learned how to play the piano. The old wooden instrument her family bought wasn't in great shape. The keys were uneven, and the sound was never perfect. But she loved it more than anything. She used to sit at it every afternoon after school. The sun would shine on the keys through her window, warming the wood just enough to make it feel alive. Back then, she didn't care about perfection. She didn't care about speed or skill. She just liked how it felt to press a key and hear a note fill the room. It made her feel like she had control over something beautiful. But as the years passed, things changed. Her classmates became cruel. Some of them played instruments too, and they were faster, louder, more confident. They mocked her because she learned slowly, because she took her time, because her rhythms were soft instead of bold. They said she would never get better. They said some people just weren't made for music. She still remembered how those words felt, how heavy they were. They stuck with her long after she left school. Even when she tried to practice at home, their voices would echo in her mind, making her doubt herself. Eventually, she played less and less. She stopped sharing her music with anyone. She kept it locked inside her, like a secret. And even though she never stopped loving it, she started believing what those classmates said. She thought maybe they were right. Maybe she wasn't made for music. But now, sitting on this stage in front of strangers, the memory didn't hurt the same way it used to. Instead, it made her realize something important. Those people were wrong. They never understood her love for music. They never knew how much she practiced when no one was watching. They never felt the peace she felt when her fingers danced across the keys. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about them. She wasn't thinking about judgment or mistakes. She was thinking only about the music. She let her fingers fall into place again. This time she chose a piece she used to play late at night, when everyone else was asleep. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. It was soft, steady, and full of emotion. A piece that felt like telling a story without speaking. As soon as she began, she felt herself slipping into a familiar rhythm. The hall around her disappeared. The only thing that existed was the melody. She let the notes flow gently, one after another. Her hands moved with confidence she didn't even realize she still had. Each sound filled the space, warm and calm. It felt like she was giving the room something she had been saving inside her for years. Somewhere in the audience, a person whispered, "I didn't expect this." Another murmured, "She plays beautifully." But their voices didn't reach her fully. She was too lost in her own world. As the piece continued, her memories kept weaving into the music. She remembered the day she stopped practicing altogether. She remembered sitting at her piano at home, staring at the keys, unable to lift her hands. She felt too tired, too discouraged. It felt like her dream had slipped out of her hands. Now, sitting here, she realized something she had never truly let go. The music had always stayed inside her, waiting quietly. Her fingers moved lightly through a soft part of the piece. She could almost feel her younger self sitting beside her. The girl who used to play with wonder instead of fear. The girl who didn't care about mistakes. The girl who believed music was meant to be felt, not judged. She wanted that girl back. The melody grew a little louder, not in a harsh way, but in a hopeful way. People in the hall leaned forward without even realizing it. No one expected someone so quiet, so gentle, to play with such emotion. She didn't speed up. She didn't try to show off. She simply played with honesty. And that honesty was enough to touch everyone listening. An older woman near the front wiped her eyes. A man who had his arms crossed earlier now had them resting on his knees, leaning in. Even the organizer who teased her at first was standing still, eyes fixed on her hands. she kept her focus on the music. For her, this wasn't about proving anything. She wasn't trying to impress the people around her. She was simply letting herself breathe again, letting her heart speak in a way words never could. As she moved into the next part of the piece, her confidence grew. A slight warmth spread through her chest, not pride, but relief. Relief that she still had this part of herself. Relief that music had never truly left her. Relief that she had finally allowed herself to return to something she loved. The hall remained silent, but not the kind of silence that comes from boredom. This silence came from attention, from respect. She didn't see their faces, but she could feel the quiet around her. It felt comforting. She continued playing, letting each note fall exactly where it was meant to be. The melody rose gently and fell smoothly, like waves moving across the shore. Her hands glided over the keys, soft but sure. At one point, she made a small mistake, just a slip of the finger. In the past, that would have made her panic. She would have stopped or apologized. But now, she barely reacted. She kept going. The piece didn't break. The moment didn't crumble. It felt natural. Human. Someone in the hall actually smiled at that. It made her feel real, relatable. The melody reached its softest point, a part she used to struggle with. It required gentle control, calm breathing, and a relaxed mind. She closed her eyes briefly to steady herself, then let her fingers fall exactly where they needed to. The hall felt like it was holding its breath. Then the piece slowly began to rise again, moving toward its final moments. Her hands glided faster, but not in a rushed way. She was moving with emotion, not pressure. The notes fluttered smoothly, carrying warmth through the room. She could feel that she was nearing the end. A small ache formed in her chest, a strange mix of happiness and sadness. She didn't want the moment to end. She didn't want to let go of this feeling. She wished she could stay at the piano forever. But every song has a final note. As she reached the last passage, she softened her playing. Each note became lighter, like a whisper. She finished the piece with a slow, gentle chord that lingered faintly in the air. She didn't move right away. Her fingers stayed touching the keys. Her breathing was calm and steady. She had given everything she had to the music, and now she just sat there, letting the last vibration fade. Behind her, the silence stretched for a moment longer than before. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't hesitation. It was the kind of silence that comes after people witness something unexpectedly beautiful. Finally, she lowered her hands and placed them on her lap. She didn't turn around yet. She sat still, letting herself feel the weight of the moment. Her heart was full, not heavy, not nervous full. The music had opened a part of her she thought was gone. Only then did she slowly lift her head and breathe out softly. She still didn't know the reaction behind her. She didn't know how people were looking at her now. She didn't know if they were impressed, shocked, or confused. But she knew one thing clearly. She had played for herself, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt free. She stood near the piano with a strange mix of calm and fear resting inside her. The room around her buzzed with small conversation students talking, chairs moving, footsteps echoing softly, but all of it felt distant. She could only focus on the keys in front of her. She brushed her fingertips across them slowly, almost like greeting an old friend she had not seen in years. The teacher had asked her if she wanted to try a warm-up before the class officially started. She nodded, though her heart still pounded lightly in her chest. She knew people were watching. She could feel their eyes on her. Some looked curious, others confused, maybe even doubtful. But she didn't let herself glance their way. She pressed one key, then another, testing the piano's tone. The instrument wasn't perfect, some notes were slightly uneven, and the wood showed signs of age, but that didn't bother her. She had learned to love pianos like this. Old pianos had character. Their stories lived inside them. She took a slow breath and let her hands settle on the keys. She didn't start playing right away. She needed a moment to steady her thoughts, to remind herself that she wasn't the same person she used to be, the girl who shrank into corners, who believed she wasn't good enough for anyone to notice. Then she began. The melody she chose wasn't loud or fast. It was soft and flowing, a piece she used to play late at night when her thoughts were too heavy. She had never played it in front of anyone before, but it felt right to start with something that belonged to her, something honest. The notes drifted into the room like a small wave, gentle at first, then gradually fuller. Her hands moved with a natural ease she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't playing to impress. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just let the music guide her. The room grew quieter. She didn't see it, but the students who were chatting moments ago began turning toward her, their voices fading out one by one. Even the teacher paused in the middle of arranging music sheets. A gentle tune filled every corner of the hall, wrapping the room in a calm warmth that made people stop what they were doing. Her eyes stayed on the keys, but she could feel the shift in the air. For a second, a familiar fear flickered inside her, fear of being seen, fear of being judged. But it faded quickly, replaced by something more powerful. Trust in herself. Her fingers moved faster now, gliding across the keys with confidence that surprised even her. The melody picked up, looming into a fuller, richer sound. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steadied. Every note she played pulled her deeper into the piece. The girl who used to doubt everything felt herself disappearing into the music. The world around her blurred until she could no longer hear the small movements in the room. She played as if she were alone with the piano, in a space where nothing could interrupt her. When she reached the middle of the piece, a soft, emotional section, her hands slowed. Each note felt like a quiet whisper. Her mind drifted back to the evenings she practiced alone at home, the quiet moments when she used music to comfort herself. She felt that same comfort now. And yet, she also felt something new. She felt seen. She didn't stop. She didn't hesitate. The soft passage slowly built up again, leading into a brighter section. Her hands moved quickly, tapping the keys with growing strength. The melody rose like a small victory. Her victory. When she finally reached the last note, she let it ring out and fade into silence. She lifted her hands from the keys slowly, unsure of what to expect when she turned around. A small part of her thought the room would go back to its usual noise. Maybe someone would shrug. Maybe someone would laugh. Maybe no one would care. But when she turned her head slightly, she saw something that made her heart stop for a moment. The entire room was silent. Students stared at her, some with wide eyes, others with soft, surprised expressions. It wasn't the kind of silence that made her uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came from disbelief, the kind that settled on a room when something unexpected happened. And then, slowly, someone began to clap. It wasn't loud, just a gentle clap from one person near the back. But it was enough to break the stillness. Another clap followed. Then another. Soon, more hands joined in until the whole room filled with soft applause, not enthusiastic or exaggerated, but warm and real. Her chest tightened with emotion. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to attention that felt genuine. She didn't know where to look, so she lowered her gaze slightly and gave a shy smile. The teacher stepped forward, her voice softer than usual. "That was beautiful," she said. "Thank you for sharing that with us." She didn't know how to respond. Her throat felt tight. She only nodded gently. One of the students near the front leaned toward another and whispered, not realizing she could hear, "I didn't know she could play like that." Another replied softly, "I didn't know she played at all." The quiet comments didn't bother her. They actually made her smile faintly. For once, Being underestimated wasn't something that weighed her down. It felt freeing, almost funny. They didn't know because she never tried to be seen, Dot, and now they finally did. The teacher gestured for her to return to her seat. She walked back slowly, her legs slightly shaky, but her heart glowing with a warmth she had never felt in this room before. Dot, as she sat down, girl beside her leaned in. "That was really, really good," she whispered. "I didn't expect that at all." She gave a small smile. "Thank you." More students turned toward her with similar comments. Simple words, soft voices, but each one made her heart grow lighter. For the rest of the class, she didn't play again. She didn't need to. The room didn't feel the same as it did before. Something unspoken had shifted. People saw her differently now. When the bell rang and everyone began packing their things, someone from across the room approached her. He looked hesitant but sincere. "Do you think?" he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "You could maybe show me that left-hand pattern sometime? The one you played in the middle?" She blinked, surprised. "Sure," she said softly. "I can." He smiled and nodded before walking away. She stood quietly in the now emptying room, taking in everything. The soft applause, the surprised faces, the sudden warmth from people who barely looked at her before. She wasn't used to any of it. But she didn't push it away. Dot, as she walked out of the music hall, she felt the sunlight on her face. She paused and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth settle into her. Dot, it wasn't just a performance. Dot, it was a step. A small step, maybe, but one that carried the weight of months, even years of fear, doubt, and silence. Today, she had let her music speak. Dot, and for the first time in a long time, people listened. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how her life in the class would change from here. But today was enough. Dot, today, she had given a piece of herself to the world, and the world had given something back. She woke up the next day with a mix of excitement and nervousness flowing quietly through her chest. What had happened yesterday kept replaying in her mind: the quiet room, the surprised looks, the first time someone had walked up to her just to say she played well. She had never expected even a moment like that, not from this group, not in this place where she had always felt like an outsider. But the memory of that moment made her smile without meaning to. For the first time since she joined the class, she felt a small sense of belonging, even if she wasn't fully ready to trust it. She took her time getting ready, making sure she wouldn't rush out the door like she often did. Her hands felt steady, her steps light. When she arrived at the music hall, she saw a few students already inside. They were talking among themselves, the usual morning noise. Normally, she kept her head down and walked straight to the back, just to avoid being noticed. But today felt different. Their voices didn't feel sharp the way they once did. She didn't feel like she needed to hide. She sat down in her usual seat, quietly observing the room. A few of them glanced at her, but not with the dismissive expressions she had grown used to. They looked curious, almost thoughtful, like they were seeing her for the first time. A few minutes passed before the teacher walked in with a stack of papers and a warm smile. She set them down on the table and turned toward the class. "Today," she announced, "we're going to try something different. We'll be working on short group performances. Each group will choose a melody and practice it together. Then, at the end of the week, we'll have a small in-class showcase." There were a few whispers, some complaints, and a couple of excited reactions. But she felt a cold wave of worry inside her. Group work had always been difficult for her. She hated the thought of holding anyone back or having to depend on others to include her. The teacher began reading off the group arrangements. She listened carefully, hoping she wouldn't end up with anyone who had teased her before. When her name was finally read, She was placed with 3 students who weren't exactly close to her. They weren't cruel, but they weren't warm either. She took a slow breath and walked toward them. The 3 looked at her for a moment before one of them gave a polite nod. "Let's just pick something simple," one of them said. "Something we can all manage." They flipped through the sheets, considering different melodies. Someone pointed at a short, easy piece. Another disagreed, wanting something slightly more challenging. The conversation stayed calm, but no one asked for her input. She didn't push herself into the discussion. She just watched quietly, unsure whether she should speak up or wait for someone to ask. After a few minutes, one of them finally looked at her. "Do you have any ideas?" She hesitated. She didn't want to sound demanding or act like she knew better than anyone else. But she also didn't want to repeat her old habit of staying silent. "There's a melody on page 3, she said softly. "It's simple, but it has a really nice flow. I think it would suit all of us." They turned to the page and looked at it. All 3 nodded slowly. "Yeah," one of them agreed. "This one could work." Before she could react, another added, "You played pretty well yesterday. Maybe you can help us get the rhythm right." Her eyes widened a little. No one had ever asked her for help before, not in this class, not with anything. She nodded. "Sure, if you want." They moved toward the piano, gathering their papers. The group took their places, and she sat at the piano bench. She played the melody once, softly, to give everyone a clear idea of how it sounded. They listened carefully, following the notes with their eyes. "That's really smooth," one of them said. "Yeah," another added. "Let's try to match that." She felt her chest warm. Not from pride, not from attention, just from the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for something she loved. They practiced together for the next half hour. They made mistakes, laughed at small missteps, and tried again. She found herself giving small suggestions, pointing out where the rhythm could feel more natural, or where someone might need to slow down a bit. To her surprise, no one pushed back. No one mocked her. They listened. By the time the teacher walked around to check each group's progress, they were already getting comfortable with the melody. The teacher stopped near them and listened quietly as they played through the piece. When they finished, she nodded with a smile. "You're blending nicely," the teacher said. Then she looked at her. "You've brought a good balance to the group. Keep going like this." The teacher walked away, but her words stayed with her, settling warmly in her chest. For the rest of the class, the group practiced together. They didn't treat her like an outsider anymore. They asked for her thoughts, included her in their small jokes, and didn't talk over her the way others once did. When the class ended, they agreed to meet again the next day to keep practicing. She left the room feeling lighter than she had felt in months, but the day wasn't done. Later, while she walked through the hallway, she heard someone call out to her from behind. She turned and saw the same girl who had complimented her the day before. "Hey," the girl said, walking up with a friendly smile. "Are you joining the showcase next week?" "I'm in a group," she replied. "We're practicing the melody from page 3. That's a pretty piece. You'll do well." She nodded, feeling a small flutter inside. She wasn't used to casual conversations like this. It felt unfamiliar, but in a good way. The girl hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Yesterday, the way you played? It was, I don't know. It just felt real. Not like you were trying to impress anyone. I liked that." She lowered her gaze for a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't think anyone was really listening." "Well," the girl said with a soft laugh, "you'd be surprised how many people were." She didn't know what to say. She had spent so long believing she was invisible that hearing something like this felt unreal. As the girl walked away, she stood still for a moment, letting the words sink in. That night, when she went home, She couldn't stop thinking about everything her group, the quiet compliments, and the new energy in the room. It felt like the beginning of something she had always wanted, but never imagined she would actually get. She sat by her window for a long time, thinking about the showcase that would happen at the end of the week. The old fear tried to creep. She woke up on the day of the showcase with a quiet heaviness in her chest. It wasn't fear, not the sharp, overwhelming kind she used to feel, but something gentler, something that reminded her how important this moment was. She sat for a while at the edge of her bed, letting the morning light settle over her like a soft blanket. Her hands were steady, though, and that alone surprised her. A year ago, even the thought of playing in front of a group would have made her shake. Today she felt different. Stronger in a way she couldn't quite explain. She got ready slowly, choosing simple clothes that made her feel comfortable rather than trying to impress anyone. She looked at her reflection for a brief moment. She didn't look confident, not exactly, but she looked calmer, like someone who had finally accepted that she didn't have to prove herself to anyone except the person staring back at her. When she arrived at the music hall, students were scattered around the room, chatting excitedly. The showcase wasn't a big event. It was only for the class. But to her, it felt like the world. Her group was already gathered near the piano, going over their notes. They looked up when they saw her. "You made it," one of them said with a smile. She nodded. "Of course." They practiced softly for a few minutes, just enough to remind themselves of the rhythm. The teacher walked around, checking on each group, offering short suggestions. When she reached them, she gave them an encouraging nod. "You've worked well together this week," the teacher said. "Just relax and enjoy it." She appreciated those words more than she expected. When the showcase finally began, the groups performed one by one. She watched the others closely. Some played confidently, some rushed through their notes, some laughed through small mistakes. The room felt warm and supportive, nothing like the tense atmosphere she used to feel on regular days. When it was her group's turn, her heart thumped once heavy, solid, but then steadied as she walked toward the piano. They arranged themselves, took their positions, and exchanged a small nod before starting. The first notes came out soft and careful. Then the melody grew fuller, each of them blending into the rhythm they had practiced together all week. She kept her focus on the keys, but she could feel the cohesion around her. Every sound, every movement felt and synced out her part, came naturally, fluidly. She didn't have to think about each note. Her fingers moved with the quiet confidence she had built over the past days. She wasn't trying to stand out. She wasn't trying to be better than anyone. She just wanted to add something meaningful to the music. Halfway through the piece, she allowed herself a small glance at the room. She noticed how quiet it was. No one whispered. No one shifted impatiently. They were listening, really listening. The final note drifted softly into the room, hanging in the air before fading completely. For a moment, there was silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that came when people needed a second to absorb what they had heard. Then a small wave of applause filled the room. She breathed out slowly, her shoulders relaxing. She looked at her group, and they smiled back with genuine warmth. "That was our best one of them whispered. She nodded. Unable to hide her relief, they walked back to their seats. And as she sat down, something unexpected happened. A student from another group leaned forward from the row behind her. "You play beautifully," the student said softly. She froze for a second. "Thank you," she replied, her voice small but sincere. Another student chimed in, smiling. "You have a really gentle style." It made the whole piece sound better. Their words warmed her more than she thought they would. As the showcase continued, she watched the remaining performances with a newfound calmness. She wasn't worried about comparing herself or wondering whether she belonged. For the first time, she felt like she was simply part of the class, not invisible, not underestimated, just included. After the final group finished, the teacher stood at the front of the room. "I'm proud of all of you," she said. Each group brought something different today. But what made this morning special wasn't perfection. It was the way everyone tried, supported each other, and worked together. That's what real music is about. Her gaze swept across the class, and for a brief moment it lingered on her. "You've all grown," the teacher added. "Some of you more than you realize." The class began packing up, chatting excitedly about their performances. She gathered her papers and stood from her seat when she felt someone approach Dot. It was the girl who had encouraged her earlier in the week. "You were great," she said warmly. "I'm glad you didn't hold back today." Her heart swelled a little. "I was nervous," she admitted. "Everyone was," the girl replied. "But you played with heart. That's what people noticed." She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded, her smile small but genuine Dot as she began walking toward the door. The older man who often came to check the instruments stepped into the room. He had probably heard the music from the hallway. He looked at her with a gentle expression. "I heard your performance," he said. "You've grown so much since the first time I listened to you." She felt her throat tighten. "Thank you for hearing me that day," she said softly. "It helped more than you know." He nodded, his eyes warm. "Never be afraid to let your music speak. Sometimes it tells people things words never can." As she stepped outside the music hall, the air felt lighter, almost new. Students walked past her, chatting happily, laughing about tiny mistakes, praising each other's efforts. But what surprised her most was that several of them looked her way, not with judgment, not with doubt, but with acknowledgment. A few even smiled. She walked slowly across the courtyard, letting everything settle inside her. The nervous girl who used to shrink into the back of the room felt far away now. In her place stood someone who had finally stepped forward, even if it was only a small step, and that small step had changed everything. When she reached the gate, she paused for a moment and looked back at the music hall. It had once felt like the one place where she didn't belong, where her voice, her music, didn't matter. Dot now. It felt different. Dot. It felt like the place where she finally found her voice. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. The world felt quieter, calmer, almost as if it were waiting for her next move. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she would ever perform for a bigger audience, or if she would continue playing only for herself. But she knew one thing for certain. She would never again let fear stop her from touching the keys. Not after everything she had discovered. Not after everything she had become. With a soft smile, she turned and walked home lighter, braver, and ready for whatever music life placed in front of her next.